Jonathan wasn't a man easily rattled. He had worked long hours, paid his dues, and tried to keep peace in the neighborhood. But when he opened his mailbox and pulled out the stiff envelope with the HOA's crest, he felt a jolt in his stomach. Inside was a letter accusing him of unauthorized fishing on Silver Pine Lake, the very same lake his grandfather had once taught him to fish on. The fine was $600. $600 for casting a line where he had spent his entire childhood summers. He read the notice twice, then 3 times, the words blurring together with disbelief. To the HOA, it was just another violation logged in their system. But to Jonathan, it felt like they had put a price tag on his. That evening, Jonathan walked down the familiar trail to the water. The lake shimmered under the fading sun, just as it had when he was a boy. He remembered his grandfather's laugh echoing across the water, the thrill of reeling in his first catch, and the way they would cook the fish on a small campfire by the shore. For Jonathan, the lake was more than water and fish. It was a piece of family history. It was where he had learned patience, respect for nature, and the quiet joy of being still. Now the HOA was telling him it was nothing more than restricted property, policed by fines. His heart ached as he skipped a stone across the ripples, wondering when community rules had replaced the next HOA meeting. Jonathan gathered his courage and raised the issue. He stood in the crowded hall, facing a row of board members behind their polished table. Margaret Winters, the HOA president, adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "Mr. Reed," she said crisply, "you violated Section 14 of the Community Code. Unauthorized fishing is considered trespassing. Rules are rules." Jonathan's voice trembled at first, but steadied. "This isn't just about rules. That lake has been part of this community long before there was ever an HOA. My grandfather fished there, my father fished there, and I." Margaret cut him off. "That is irrelevant. If you can't respect the regulations, perhaps you should consider living somewhere else." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some neighbors looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered but stayed silent. Jonathan felt the weight of isolation pressing down on him. In that moment he realized he was alone against a machine that had no interest. That night, Jonathan sat at his dining table surrounded by stacks of papers, old family records, land surveys, county deeds. The soft lamplight cast long shadows as he traced the history of Silver Pine Lake. Hours passed, but one detail caught his eye: a gap. The HOA didn't own the lake. The deed was still held by a private seller, a family that had quietly kept the rights but never used them. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, the spark of an idea flickering. What if the HOA's power over the lake wasn't real at all? What if he could take back what they had tried to strip away? For the first time since the fine arrived, Jonathan felt calm. His frustration gave way to determination. This wasn't over. 2 weeks later, Jonathan shook hands with a county lawyer and signed the final papers. The deed slid across the table, heavy with history and possibility. He had bought Silver Pine Lake. It wasn't cheap, but to Jonathan, the cost was more than worth it. This was no longer about a $600 fine. It was about principle. It was about ensuring that no self-appointed committee could erase decades of memories and tradition. As he walked out of the office, deed in hand, he felt taller, lighter, freer. The HOA thought they had cornered him with their fine. Instead, they had pushed him into taking back the very heart of the community. At the following HOA meeting, the room buzzed with routine complaints about fences and lawn lengths. Jonathan waited until the end, then calmly stepped forward. "I'd like to address the fishing violation," he said, placing a folded document on the table. Margaret smirked, ready to remind him of his unpaid fine. But when Jonathan unfolded the deed, her expression faltered. "This," he said, his voice steady, "is the legal ownership of Silver Pine Lake. As of last week, the lake is private property, my property, and fishing is allowed only by my invitation." Gasps echoed around the room. Neighbors leaned forward in shock. For once Margaret's confident tone deserted her. She stammered something about procedure, but the crowd was no longer listening. Jonathan had just flipped the entire board's power upside down with a single piece of paper. Weeks later, Jonathan sat at the edge of his dock, fishing pole in hand. The sun dipped low, painting the lake gold and red. Children's laughter drifted across the water. Kids he had personally invited, families who remembered when neighbors looked out for each other. The HOA had tried to take away something priceless with a fine. Instead, they had pushed Jonathan to protect it forever. The lake was no longer